My name is Tito, and I'm a dog. I see things humans miss because they're too busy worrying to notice. Like how my human mom's hands shake when she hears sirens. Or how her 16-year-old son holds his breath every time a police car drives by our house. But nothing prepared me for the night when those same officers knocked on our door, looking for the suspicious person, who was sitting right there at our kitchen table, asking Mom what's for dinner. I crawled under that table and watched my family's world turn upside down, and I realized something that still keeps me awake at night. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you're most afraid of. I'm just a dog, but I see everything. And what I witnessed that night changed how I understand humans forever. To understand why that night shook our world, you need to know who we are and what our normal looked like before everything changed. I've been living with Miss Alicia in this small brick house on Maple Street in suburban Georgia for 5 years now. Since I was barely 2 and she found me at the county shelter. She chose me, she said, because I had kind eyes and because I didn't bark at the other dogs. Maybe she needed someone quiet, someone who would just listen. Miss Alicia works the night shift at Mercy General Hospital. She's a registered nurse in the cardiac unit. She's 34, a black woman with gentle hands that smell like lavender lotion and hospital antiseptic. Her laugh sounds like wind chimes, but I don't hear it often enough. She's raising 2 kids on her own. Marcus, who's 16 and looks just like her with those same thoughtful brown eyes, and little Zara, who's 8 and always tries to braid the fur behind my ears. Our house sits at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The neighbors keep to themselves mostly. Mrs. Henderson waters her roses each morning at exactly 7. Mr. Patterson mows his lawn every Saturday. The Williams family has lived across the street for 20 years. It's the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways, but rarely stop to talk. Miss Alicia bought this house 3 years ago. Our forever home, she called it, running her hands along the kitchen counter like she couldn't believe it was real. She worked double shifts for 2 years to save the down payment. I watched her counting bills at the kitchen table, night after night, dividing money into envelopes labeled groceries, Marcus's books, Zara's dance class. Every morning before work, she makes sure the porch light is on and the doors are locked twice. She kisses both kids goodbye, even when Marcus pretends to be too old for it. She scratches behind my ears and whispers, "Take care of them, Tito." I always do. Every family has their rhythms, their quiet moments of love. But some families carry invisible weights too. But our peaceful routines started shifting about 3 weeks before everything changed. I noticed things humans miss, like how Miss Alicia's breathing got shorter when she double-checked the locks, or how she'd linger at the front window a beat too long when headlights swept across our yard. There was something new in her shoulders, a tightness that appeared whenever Marcus walked through the door after sunset. The incident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday. Marcus had stayed late for basketball practice and then gone to his friend Tyler's house to work on a history project. He texted Miss Alicia at 9:30 p.m. "Almost done, be home by 10:30. She replied, "Okay, baby, text when you're walking home." But Marcus's phone died. And in our neighborhood, a young black man walking alone at night apparently looked suspicious to someone. Mrs. Patterson, not the husband who mows the lawn, but his sister visiting from out of town, saw Marcus walking down Maple Street at 10:45 p.m. She didn't recognize him, despite the fact that he'd lived here for 3 years. Instead of looking closer, instead of maybe asking, "Are you okay? Do you live around here?" she called 911. "There's a suspicious person walking through our neighborhood," she reported. Young black male, tall, wearing dark clothing. He keeps looking at houses like he's casing them. Marcus wasn't casing anything. He was checking house numbers in the dark, trying to figure out which street would get him home fastest, since he'd taken a different route from Tyler's. Miss Alicia had just gotten home from work at 11:20 p.m. She'd kicked off her nursing shoes and was heating up leftover soup when she heard Marcus's key in the front door. Relief washed over her face. I could smell it, that specific scent when worry finally releases its grip. "Hey Mom, sorry I'm late. Phone died and..." That's when the knocking came. 3 authoritative raps that cut through the quiet house like a blade. I felt Miss Alicia freeze. Not just pause, freeze, like prey when it senses a predator. Her heart rate spiked so fast I could hear it. Marcus looked confused, then concerned when he saw his mother's face. "Police, open up!" The words hit our house like stones thrown at glass. Miss Alicia's hands began to shake. Not the gentle tremor of fatigue, but the violent shaking of someone whose nervous system has just flooded with adrenaline and fear. I watched her transform in that moment. This woman who saves lives, who stays calm during medical emergencies, who once talked down a patient having a psychotic episode. She became someone I'd never seen before. Someone small and scared and vulnerable. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Go to your room. Now." "Mom, what? Now?" I slipped under the kitchen table. Not because I was afraid of the police, but because I was afraid for Miss Alicia. Dogs understand pack dynamics, territory, threat assessment, and every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong with this picture. Miss Alicia walked to the front door like she was approaching her own execution. I could smell the fierce sweat beginning to form, could hear her trying to control her breathing. She turned on the porch light and looked through the peephole. 2 officers stood on our front steps, both white, both large, both with hands resting casually near their weapons. Not threatening, exactly, but not relaxed either. "What can I help you with, officers?" Miss Alicia called through the door, her voice steady but hollow. "We received a report of suspicious activity in the neighborhood. A young black male was seen walking around, possibly casing houses. You seen anything unusual tonight?" The irony hit me like a physical blow. They were asking Miss Alicia if she'd seen anything suspicious, and the suspicious person was her own son, now hiding in his bedroom because his mother's instincts told her to protect him. "No, sir, I haven't seen anything unusual," she replied. True enough, Marcus coming home late wasn't unusual. Marcus walking through his own neighborhood wasn't suspicious. But her voice carried the weight of 1,000 other truths she couldn't speak. "Mind if we take a look around? Check your backyard. Make sure everything's secure?" This is where I watched my Miss Alicia make a choice that would haunt me for months. She could have said no. She had every right to say no. But she opened the door. "Of course, officers. Whatever you need." I stayed under that table and watched her lead 2 strangers through our home. Our sanctuary. The place where Zara practices piano every afternoon, where Marcus does homework at the kitchen counter, where Miss Alicia drinks coffee in her pajamas on Sunday mornings. They didn't find anything, because there was nothing to find. But they took their time. They looked in the backyard where Zara's swing set sits. They checked the side gate. They asked questions about how long we'd lived here, whether we'd had any problems with break-ins. All while Marcus hid in his room, probably wondering if he'd done something wrong by existing in his own neighborhood after dark. When they finally left, Miss Alicia closed the door and locked it. Then she locked the deadbolt. Then she checked it twice more. She stood with her back against that door for a full minute, breathing like she'd just run a marathon. Then she called for Marcus. He emerged from his room cautious and confused. "Mom, what was that about?" Instead of answering, Miss Alicia pulled him into the tightest hug I'd ever seen her give. She held on to her son like he might disappear, like someone might try to take him away from her. And I realized something that made my chest ache. This wasn't the first time she'd been afraid for him. This was just the first time that fear had knocked on our door. "Promise me," she whispered into his shoulder. "Promise me you'll always text when you're walking home, even if your phone is dying. Find a way." "Mom, promise me." "I promise." But I could see in Marcus's eyes that he was beginning to understand something he shouldn't have to understand at 16. That his presence in his own neighborhood could be seen as a threat. That his mother's fear wasn't irrational. It was educated. That night, Miss Alicia didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold while she stared at the front door. I lay at her feet, offering what comfort I could. Every time a car passed by, her muscles tensed. Every time the house settled, she looked up. At 3 a.m., she whispered to me, "Tito, what kind of world is this? What kind of world makes a mother afraid to let her child walk home?" I didn't have an answer, but I stayed with her until sunrise. Some fears live in our bodies, passed down through generations. Some doors carry more weight than others. Have you ever felt afraid in a place that should feel safe? 3 weeks later, Miss Alicia did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She showed up to the monthly neighborhood association meeting, the first one she'd ever attended. She sat in the back at first, just listening. They discussed streetlight maintenance and holiday decorations and the annual block party. Normal things, safe things. Then, during new business, Miss Alicia stood up. "I'd like to discuss community safety," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Specifically, how we can make sure our neighborhood is safe for everyone who lives here." She told them about that night, about Marcus, about the call to police, about how a young man walking home from a friend's house became a suspicious person, simply because someone didn't recognize him. She didn't speak with anger. She spoke with the calm authority of a nurse explaining a medical procedure. Facts, consequences, better ways forward. "I propose we create a neighborhood contact list," she said, "with photos and brief descriptions of all residents. So we know who belongs here. So we can reach out to each other before we reach for the phone to call police on our own neighbors." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Mrs. Henderson, the Rose Lady, raised her hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "I'd like to help organize it." One by one, other hands went up. Mr. Patterson, the Williams family, even some people I'd never seen before. 6 months later, our neighborhood looks different. Not the houses, those are the same, but the feeling. People wave and actually stop to talk. Mrs. Henderson brought Miss Alicia roses when she got promoted to charge nurse. The Williams family invited us to their grandson's graduation party. And me? I've become something I never expected. Miss Alicia started bringing me to the monthly meetings. Not as a pet, exactly, but as what she calls community support. I lie quietly while people talk about making our street better, safer, kinder. Some of the residents pet me while they share their concerns. Mrs. Chun talks to me about her late husband while scratching behind my ears. Mr. Davis tells me about his grandson in the military while we sit on his front porch. I've learned that healing happens in small moments, in recognition, in the decision to see each other as neighbors instead of strangers, in choosing to build bridges instead of walls. Miss Alicia still checks the locks twice each night. But she also leaves the porch light on as a welcome, not just as a warning. Marcus walks home with confidence now, knowing that the people on our street know his name, know his face, know he belongs here. Humans forget, sometimes, that safety isn't just about locks and lights and calling the police. Real safety comes from knowing and being known, from communities that choose to see each other clearly, without the distortion of fear or assumption. Behind every door that gets knocked on in fear, there's a family. There's a child. There's a heart that shouldn't have to race at the sound of footsteps on their own front porch. But behind every door that opens in welcome, there's hope. There's the possibility that tomorrow might be a little kinder than today. If this story moved you, I hope you'll share it. Not for me, but for every family who deserves to feel safe in their own neighborhood. And if you have a story about community, about neighbors becoming family, about fear transforming into understanding, please share it in the comments. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the smallest acts of recognition. Subscribe here and never miss another story that inspires,